Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Reading Solutions UK's first International Reading Conference. For those who haven't heard, Reading Solutions, they work within schools to improve pupils' reading fluency, stamina and comprehension through their online reading development programme, Reading Plus. So my name is Christina Gavitas, and I'm an author and founder of Children's Literature Festivals Charity. I'm also patron for children and young people at Blackburn with Darwin Libraries. And when I was asked to host this conference, the 3-day conference, I was so excited because everything resonates with what I do and what I stand for and the work that I do. So we're really looking forward now to listening to Rebekah Ricketts, who's head of English at Safa British School in Dubai. Rebekah will be discussing strategies to build a thriving reading culture. So please feel free to ask questions, pop them in the chat box. We'll pick them up and then we'll read them out at the end of the session. I'll ask the questions to Rebekah for you. Okay, so welcome, Rebekah.
Hi, thank you very much, and thank you for everybody who is listening today. I'm not glad at all that I'm following the EdTech one, because now I've got to share my screen and make sure everybody can see my PowerPoint. So bear with me. I'm hoping these like the days of online teaching. Let's hope that we can
see that. That's fine. I'll mute myself now.
All right, thank you. So again, thank you very much to everybody who is listening today, and I really do appreciate it. Now, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction to myself, first of all. Why is it not letting me? There we go. So this is my 4th year living and working in Dubai. I've worked in 2 very different schools, but both of those as head of English. And before that, I worked in the UK for 7 years, and I led on Key Stage 3 there. Now, developing reading is something that I have always had a huge passion for as part of my career. As a person, I've always been a very, very passionate reader. And I think I kind of took for granted my own enjoyment of reading and the encouragement actually that I got from my family in terms of being a reader. And then the reality kind of really hit when I started teaching and was working in schools and realizing that there were students who weren't necessarily very keen readers and probably didn't get the same kind of support at home that I was getting. So I think it was for me one of those things that it became a huge passion project. So I've worked on the development of reading, as you can see on the screen, in 3 schools, 2 here in the UAE, and then 1 as part of an MPQSL project in the UK. Alongside that, I also lead my school debate teams. We are part of the World Scholars Cup, and again, part of the whole reading culture. We've really kind of made that the forefront and the focus, pushing that whole kind of reading and whole school literacy and oracy to the forefront. I do host the Monday Twilight Show on alternate Mondays on Teachers Talk Radio, and I'm contributing to the book Key Stage 3, The Wasted Years Not on Our Watch, leading on the reading chapter. And I'm almost going to forget that I am also working on a project for the Open University Reading for Pleasure course. So I feel like I have a lot of experience, but also a lot of interest in this particular kind of field. So moving on, sorry, it's making that awful noise. Now, one of the biggest things that, okay, we'll go there. One of the biggest things for me about reading is the fact, and again, I'm quoting Alex Quigley, is the fact that it is the master skill. And I strongly believe that. I think it's the foundation, and I think it is the core of everything that we are doing as teachers, regardless of whether you are an English teacher, maths teacher, science teacher, PE teacher. Reading is the thing that we all need to take away. Now, this is the map that I share with staff and with parents. I share a lot of the same kind of communication. Now, obviously, along the top, you can see the academic pathways and the routes and the things that we're trying to do as teachers every day. The actual logistics of reading and the reasons why it's important that students are confident and able to access the curriculum. And yes, academic success is obviously very, very important. But for me, it's the soft skills. It's the holistic development that makes reading so fundamental. The development of emotional intelligence, being able to communicate and empathize, having that confidence and self-esteem. The school that I work in, we have lots of students from lots and lots of different backgrounds, learning about different cultures all the time. I'm constantly learning about different cultures all the time. And I think that books and reading are just so important in helping to unlock those worlds for students who maybe wouldn't have those particular experiences. So yeah, that's the message that I always communicate to staff and to students, is this bit along the top, of course, massively important, but really this is what we need to be focusing on, that holistic development and that support of the soft skills. So a little bit of context then about my school. Safa British School, there it is, it's very beautiful. It's in the heart of Dubai. We can see the Burj Al Arab from one side and the Burj Khalifa from the other. So I mean, you can't get more Dubai in terms of location. And it has had a very rich history as a successful primary school. And the school realised, hang on a minute, we're taking these students right up to year 6. And then they decided to build, and they decided to grow, and they decided to start with their secondary school. So 3 years ago, they had their first cohort of students moving from year 6 into year 7. And there are current year 9s, and they're going to be my first cohort of Key Stage 4 students. Now, the reason why I wanted to give you context is because I think everybody hears Dubai and they hear the glitz and the glam and all the things that, very, very obvious. But for me, and I always feel like I have a really big responsibility, not only to my school, but the country that I live, is so much more than that. It really, really is. And our school in particular is so much more than that. Our secondary school currently only has about 200 students. So we're very, very small. We're growing and we're developing. And that was one of the reasons why I really wanted to work in this particular school, to have the opportunity to build and create something. But it is very, very different. We don't have an endless budget. I don't have a library. So everything that I'm going to talk about today, please know, no library, very few physical books, no librarian, and not an endless supply of money to kind of create this reading culture, which again is something that I feel quite passionate about, because yes, my context in the UAE is very different to those of you in the UK, but we have very, very similar struggles. We are an inclusive school, and we mean that. So we take any student. We have a very, very good and supportive, we call them the link team, working with students with SEND. And again, that's one of the biggest drives and reasons, A, why I like to promote reading, but B, from a teaching context, I teach Key Stage 3 English as mixed ability, because I don't like to put a ceiling on students. And I feel very, very strongly about developing students' cultural capital, regardless of their ability. And again, I think that's really important when we're trying to build a thriving culture of readers. So my approach, it's hardly groundbreaking, but it works for me. And it's very much this kind of 3-pronged attack. But the reason why I've got it triangulated is the fact that we can't get through without having all stakeholders on board. All 3 of these areas are intrinsically linked to make sure that we are catering and creating a culture of thriving, successful, and confident readers. The whole point and idea is that we as a staff, led by myself, are providing the support, the guidance, and the clear communication. And I first of all start with the students, then I've moved on to staff, and then finally starting to embed staff with parents at the same time. And now the 3 are running completely together, can't think of the word, but they are working in link together, all 3 at the same time. And that is the approach that I've taken. So today, as I go through the session, that's the way I'm going to kind of organize my ideas, so you can see how I've built from the very beginning, because it really was the very beginning, September last year, to literally where we are today. So the first thing was knowing my students as readers. And again, none of this is particularly groundbreaking, but I think it's really, really important. Yes, of course, we need to look at reading ages and reading abilities. Now, we started the year and we used MGRT, but then we, as a school, made the move over to Reading Plus at the end of September last year. And ever since then, that is the data that we have used. That is the data that we report on to home, to students, and what I share with staff. But for me, the biggest thing and the most important starting point is learning about the relationships that your students have with reading. And it's one of those things that sounds so obvious, but it's also one of those things that's really, really overlooked. So asking students how they feel about reading, how they like to read, what they like to read, where they like to read and when. All of these questions provides you with such an insight. And what it really does is help you to take all of these ideas, all of this enthusiasm, all of this excitement, and actually really start to hone a plan that is going to be effective and supportive for the students that you have in front of you and in your own specific context. So this was the result of student voice that I had at the end of September last year. And these were some of our headline figures. Now, these figures are particularly interesting because I feel that they all directly correlate. 60% of our students, as you can see, did not identify as being confident readers. And that was the thing that really kind of hurt my heart. And that was something that I knew was going to be the thing that was also going to hook the rest of the staff and the parents. But then when you correlate to the fact that 55% of those students were spending less than 2 hours a week reading, we didn't have a reading program, we didn't have resources, we didn't have anybody kind of being on their heels all the time. And 39% of our students actually identified as people who did not like to read. So seeing that data, I knew that there was a huge, huge mountain to climb. And I knew that it was going to take time and effort to kind of shift. I've also included the fact that we have the question about how much a family actually encourages the students to read. Now, my experience in secondary school context is that when students move into year 7, that need to read to parents, aloud reading journals, that all kind of stops. And that homeschool communication, certainly in schools that I've worked at in the past, it just kind of disappears. So I also realized that this was going to be an intrinsic part of our whole school reading program and the things that we could be doing and how we could kind of support families with the students eventually to try and triangulate those 3 areas. So a further question that I asked was, if you don't spend a lot of time reading, do you know why? Now, some of these things, they're just the fact of 21st century life. It's 21st century living, and we have to accept that they would rather be playing games or they'd be on social media or spending time with friends. You know, that's the reality of the situation. But the things that I've boxed are the things that I shared with SLT first of all, and then with staff, because these were the things that I knew that we could actually use as quick wins within the school. These were things that I knew we could fix quickly. Yes, we don't have a library. Yes, we don't have a big selection of physical books. But if we started to create conversations about reading, if we started to have book talk and actually getting those conversations into classrooms, into form time, we could maybe start to chip away at that a little bit. The whole idea and purpose was to make reading more visible to start with, just so that students could see we cared about it as a staff. They should be caring about it, and it's not something that they should feel scared about, because again, I just kept coming back all the time that 60% did not feel confident, and I really thought that this was going to be the first way that we could kind of break down that barrier. So that was student voice. Now, this is the data that I captured from Reading Plus. Next week, we're doing our end of year assessment. It's a shame really that it's not now, so I can't really celebrate and report back the progress, but this was where you can see our benchmark from the 28th of September and then to the end of January, 1st of February. And you can see immediately that in that short amount of time, because we'd embedded a reading program, because we had made Reading Plus a non-negotiable, because we had made it something to celebrate, immediately we could see the gains. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about Reading Plus because I'm sure a lot of you who are here today are already using it. But for me, one of the best things that I've been able to use from Reading Plus is that very visible, very tangible data. It's something that the students have been really able to understand and to see. And so, for example, when they're saying, oh, I'm finding my books too hard, or I want more rereads, and I'm like, okay, that's fine, or I've been on this level for ages. And then I show them, you know, how many words per minute they're reading now, how their comprehension skills have improved when you break down those individual reading skills, and they can start to see small but visible progress. Again, having those conversations, making it visible is having an impact. And again, just having those small conversations with them, one-to-one, making them see that I care, making them see that the staff care, has really kind of enabled the students to reinvigorate themselves a little bit when they've found it a little bit difficult. So without going on too much about Reading Plus, it has had a really, really positive impact for us. And it's enabled me to kind of route a structure in terms of saying, do your 5 lessons a week or your 90 minutes, whichever one you get done first, but do not use that instead of or to replace your reading for pleasure. Do that as well. And what's been really wonderful is students, it's also enabled. So for example, one boy conversation, he'd read a book about Oprah Winfrey on Reading Plus and was like, oh, that was really great. So then I was like, okay, so you like biographies, which celebrities do you like? Who do you like to read about? Who do you like to learn about? And again, it's kind of opened up that opportunity for informal book talk, even just on a one-on-one. That was a form tutor conversation, but again, it's enabling form tutors to have the same kind of conversations across the school. So having kind of put all of that data together, I went a little bit off track there, I do apologize. I kind of sifted through it all, and I'm the kind of person that I see it and I want to do it all at once. And I've really learned through my course with the Open University for Reading for Pleasure that that's definitely, as much as you want to, you need to start small and you need to start chipping away. So I broke it down to 3 key priorities. So the biggest one, again, and you're going to hear me say this a lot today, is the building of the confidence, because I want the students to feel the culture of reading and literacy across the board so that they can access the demands of a rigorous curriculum. And I thought that was really important because I thought it would help other staff from other subject areas and their buy-in, and also parents, because yes, we are a fee-paying school because that's the structure of the UAE. So parents, want to see that we're constantly thinking about curriculum and how we're creating that provision for their son or daughter. Create and sustain a culture that encourages students to enjoy reading. I don't want students to see reading as a chore. There's nothing that I hate more than hearing that a child has been put in detention and that they've been given reading time, because all of a sudden reading seems like a real punishment. So the idea of reading being a time to celebrate and to enjoy it and to actually relax, that was a huge deal for me. And then finally, like I've already touched upon, supporting a cultural capital for all of our students. Reading opportunities are not just for an elite few. And this has been a really interesting point today, because as I've been going through Twitter, as I've been procrastinating, getting ready for this presentation, there's been a lot of comments about the fact that Persuasion is going to be on Netflix. And there's been a lot of, oh, for goodness sake, I can't believe it. And, that snobbery in terms of reading and opening up the idea of the classics. Okay, it might not be the most highbrow, but if that's going to engage even one person, then surely this is a good thing. So for me, taking away that elitism, getting rid of that so that students feel that they can really, really access and engage with a whole range of texts that maybe they would have been too frightened to have before, too nervous to try. For me, that's a really, really big deal. So my first starting point, knowing the students as readers, was really to use my role as head of English and to really drive the focus of reading and literacy at word, sentence, paragraph, page, chapter, whole text level, doing all of that through the English department. I felt that it was really, really important, and this has been the same every time in all 3 contexts. Really, really important to start at my home, to start at the root in the English department, building evidence-informed practice, trialing things, trialing methods, asking people to come and watch, trialing them through lesson observations so that we could build the foundations of our reading culture within the English classroom. With that, dedicated reading time was incorporated to every single lesson, whether that was Reading Plus, whether it was class reader, whether it was own books. And that did include, and again, I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but it works. Reading my own book and sharing it with students and, getting excited about a really cool word, or getting excited about a really interesting moment, or a student putting their hand up and being like, just wait, let me finish. Okay, now talk to me. Getting them to see what reading looks like when you're enjoying it. And again, I just wanted to build that informal book talk into my lessons. I was a new teacher, this is a new school, and it was a really good way for me to get to know my classes and also to help my students find what they wanted to read. Because again, I was thinking about that data and the fact that a lot of them didn't know where to start. So through the curriculum planning as well, our first term was very much based and dedicated on reading novels. And through that, I supplemented it through using a whole other wide range of extracts from other texts to supplement. So year 7 had Private Peaceful, year 8 we actually started with Romeo and Juliet Shakespeare, but we kept bringing in further wider reading, and year 9 last year was doing Noughts and Crosses. And it just was enabling them to read, enjoy, talk, and it was very, very kind of low threat. It was a good way. I was picking up the schemes of work that I was inheriting from the person that had been working when the students had been in year 7 and 8. And it was a really good way for me to kind of get a feel for the students. Knowing them now, brand new texts in September, really, really excited, because again, we're responding to the fact that the students are starting to enjoy reading and they are starting to actually see the value and want to challenge themselves with their texts a little bit more. So again, through the lessons and again, through lesson observations, I really wanted to kind of trial this kind of stuff, was showing different reading strategies, getting students to want to read, modeling again, and that idea, you know, it's okay to pause, it's natural, it's okay to stumble over a word, how do I pronounce this word, all of those kind of things, and not just giving it lip service, actually genuinely. So the students knew that they were in a safe environment. We would do group reading, we would have table reads, we'd have whole class reads, any different things that we could trial, just to see that the students, and more hands started to come up in lessons asking, can I read, are we reading today? And that's when I knew that the tide was starting to turn in English lessons, and that I knew that we were ready when we came back in January, that we could actually start to then expand upon this in the whole school environment. So working with staff, this became then the next big part of the project. And I've had lots of discussions with my head teacher, who's my line manager, about how we were going to actually put this together. And the structure that I was going to take in terms of embedding, and we decided that starting afresh in January after the winter break, I would lead on the teaching and learning and the staff CPD. And the whole point and purpose was, again, it was evidence and research based. It was very much about our students as well, but it was about giving the strategies, and some of the strategies I'm going to talk about today. The whole idea now was that reading really did need to become more visible. There needed to be a stronger discussion point about reading across the curriculum. Now, I've got SLT support, but obviously, as you know, staff buy-in, that is absolutely crucial, because staff need to realise the worth and the value. You can't take for granted the fact that not all teachers see it as their job and their responsibility. You also can't take for granted the fact that you're asking people to do more. So the whole idea about this was to really think about how to make it seem manageable, how to kind of break it down, and then how to make sure there was support for staff. So weekly CPD, every week they knew it was coming under our reading across the curriculum arch and the framework. SLT were very much in charge of these are our expectations, this is going to be the outcome. The responsibility of it was left very much to them, which is really important because they're the people with the gravitas. And then I was just coming in and being like, okay, this is why reading's so great, and this is what we need to do, and this is what's happening with our students. This is how they feel when they're sat in your lessons every day, and this is what we can do about it. So every session, I made sure that at the end of it, there were resources created, whether that was for form time, whether it's for lesson resources, whether it were classroom displays. Every single thing was made by me or found, because I'll come on to that in a moment. Lit Drive, Twitter, amazing, a hive, but again, I'm sure people already know this. But everything was there, made for staff. At the end of the session, I'd say, go into our teams. It's already there, the PowerPoint, all the resources. So it was already loaded up, ready to go, so that people didn't have to find a thing. And as well as that, it was very much the clarity with instruction. So for every resource that was provided, I made sure in every session I went through so that the staff could see how we use them and how to work them in action. So these are some examples of some of the sessions that I did with staff and some of the things. So this was the overview. So we have focused very much, so when you look at the sessions overview there, we focus very much on literacy, vocabulary and reading strategies. Oracy is something that we're going to come back very heavily into in September. I feel that really kind of enabling the foundations, settling the foundations with literacy and vocab, and then moving on with reading were two of the really biggest areas that actually took a lot more in terms of development and embedding. I can't stress enough to take your time with it. And so then we're going to move back onto oracy. I shared with staff very, very clearly where we were going to be in the short term, where we were going to be medium term, and then obviously longer term. Now, this amazing resource here, I've shared this with you because I found this on Lit Drive. It was brilliant and I really appreciate it. I wish I could credit the person. But again, it was ready-made there. And all I had to do was print them off and laminate them and give them to staff. And they're up now in every classroom in the school. So when we've got 59 children out of a cohort of 200 saying, I don't know what books to read. Well, go and speak to your art teacher if that's your favourite subject. Go and speak to your PE teacher. Have a look on the wall in the changing room. Have a look on the wall in the science lab, because now we're starting to make reading visible and is tailored to students' particular favourite subjects. So again, it's about striking that right balance, as I've already kind of touched upon, because reading is one of those things you can tell I'm passionate about it. I know anybody that's listening today, you're passionate about it, it's why you're here. But it's about not taking for granted that everybody feels the same. Now, when I was younger and working in the UK, people would say, well, it's not my job. And I used to take that really personally, take it with much more of a pinch of salt now, because I think, well, actually, I disagree wholeheartedly, because we're here to teach young people and we're here to support them. And if they can't read, how are they going to access your curriculum? So that's always kind of like my sassy response, and that works. But then obviously it's about providing the support, because sometimes staff, as much as they don't ever want to admit it, are just not as confident, just like the students. And I think that's really, really important to remember, is make this low threatening, make this kind, make it helpful for everybody, because we're thinking all the time about how we want to treat the students, think about how we want to treat our staff, and then certainly how we want to support the parents as well, because we're talking about reading not just being an elitist thing. So make sure that that has the same undercurrent with every single person that you are speaking to when you are trying to create your reading culture. Okay, so when I was thinking about this, I was like, okay, what are the clear messages that I really want to take away from this when we're working with staff? So the first thing is the support. Making sure, first of all, that you or the team that you're working with have the support from SLT, because that's vital and crucial. And I wouldn't have been able, in the short space of time that I have had, to even begin to make the steps that we have been able to make in our school without it being an SLT priority. But again, provide the strategies, have time on the corridor and break duty to talk about it. When staff say to you, oh, I've got this really great book and I'm going to put it out in my classroom, celebrate it, appreciate it, just in the same way you would with anybody else. Open door policy in classrooms is so important. If you're driving something, let people see it on a day-to-day basis. Yes, okay, it can be nerve-wracking. Yes, it's not always the most comfortable, but if you're willing to share and show people, it becomes so much more non-threatening, and again, feels like a greater team effort. And what's even more wonderful is when somebody from another subject area says, oh, come and have a look at what I'm doing with this resource, and then I can talk about it in the following week's CPD. All of those things are really demonstrating that the tide is turning, not just with the students, but now with the staff as well. Consistency and being persistent, I think, are the two toughest parts of this whole kind of role when you're asked to kind of lead and build on something. We're busy. And as a head of English, you know, head of a course subject, I'm building a curriculum. Yes, I haven't got any GCSE students this year, but we are constantly striving and getting ready to make sure those students are ready for September. So ensuring that the deadlines that I've set myself are met, the resources have been created, the emails have been sent, those expectations have been reinforced. What's been great is been an odd morning, because you'll see with communication, I always get my emails ready on a Friday to click send on a Monday morning. There's been a couple of times when people have said, are we getting word of the week? And I think, brilliant, thank you. Hold me to account. It shows that people care about it as well. But making sure that it is consistent, because one Monday that word of the week doesn't get sent out, the whole thing falls apart and you've got to start again. And you're basically saying to the staff, do you know what? We've got a busy week. I haven't really bothered about it. Then you're saying to the kids, yeah, we're telling you your vocabulary is important, but we're not going to bother this week. It's not important. So consistency is massive. And again, being persistent, not accepting anything but the best for your students. And again, this is quite difficult, those difficult conversations, but if you've got your SLT to kind of fall back on and to help you and to support you, that is where it's also really vital. So keep those conversations going. And being realistic. Like I said to you at the beginning, I looked at this data, I looked at all my ideas, and I wanted to do everything at once. The real big thing is start small, embed, then build. Focus on those priorities, make them stick. Do one thing at a time, two things at a time. And then when they're in place and they're a routine and they're a structure, then you can add more. But if you try and throw everything at this, A, you will be exhausted, and B, it just won't last. So yes, that would be probably my biggest piece of advice today, is be very, very realistic and just take it slow. So these are some of the strategies when we were looking, and again, Twitter, I adore you. I do a lot of reading, but Twitter really, really helps. Lit Drive, again, an incredible resource. So this was some of the ideas. So Eric, I know that's been very much a primary school thing, but for me, again, in terms of building confidence, thinking again about that 60%, getting students to look at an image, getting students to listen to a piece of music, getting students to read a poem, watch a TV advert, a film trailer, whatever. But getting them to then break down those 4 key skills of explaining, retrieving, interpreting, and then looking and evaluating through choice. That has made informal book talk, informal reading talk so much easier. So that was something that we used during form time. So we use Eric once a week during form time so that students can have that time to realize that they're reading without even realizing that they're reading, because they're not lifting up a book, they're not looking at something on their screens with words, and getting them to see that difference between actually what it means to interpret and make inference. I went through different structures, what different reading skills actually meant to staff. And then the next few strategies are all things that I said, just try one of these strategies. So, you know, give students, because again, we have that real focus on vocabulary, give students a list of keywords, the things that you taught them last week, get them to look for it within these extracts, you know, getting them to practice highlighting and annotating. People walk past my classroom all the time. Visualizer is pretty much always on. Next year in September, every classroom is going to have a visualizer. So again, small wins, but again, SLT can see the value, they could see the process and the progress that was being made. So again, making predictions, using the clues to make your interpretations, to retrieve, make that choice, all of those things, so that students can look at a graph, they can look at a diagram, they can be looking at things that aren't just, you know, prose text, and thinking about how they can make predictions within their subject areas. Summarizing, again, bullet point the 5 key points. I mean, I'm coming from a school that used to teach Cambridge English, so summary was always a big part of their exam question at the GCSE, Edexcel now, by the way. But yeah, so summary and thinking about how to use summary writing. Again, I've already talked to you about annotation and analysing. I think that in terms of modelling is just so important. But you can see, and these strategies are all on the screen. I'm not going to read you through all of them. Setting time limits, we know, is really important. I've always liked to give questions for guided reading to get students to think about, or to ask questions as well, you know, get them inquisitive. And then obviously I've talked a lot about modelling already and why that's so important. because students need to hear it, especially if they're not hearing it very much at home. Other things that we've done and other things that I've given them are things like a visual Scrabble board. So finding, coming up with words. The students love that kind of competition. Come away with a word, find the highest scoring word, bring it back into school, or okay, Scrabble board's up, find me your highest scoring word. You've got a minute, highest scoring word linked to the keyword of the text or from what we've read or something that's happened in the lesson. Freya model grids, I think, are amazing, and they've been really, really successful across our curriculum. Extracts with targeted questions. Obviously, we do that a lot in English. I've also kind of provided them for form time so that people can see. Already mentioned word of the week. We've got reading posts. I'm going to show you a whole range of visuals in a moment of things that we've done in the school to kind of make reading really, really visible. And then keyword exploration sheets, looking at the etymology, transforming the words, anything that we can do to lift vocabulary, to lift reading literally off the page and getting the students to be using and playing around with this vocabulary. Now, at the end of every session, what I would ask staff to do, because they were, as you've already seen, very, very structured, very broken down, I asked staff to create their own pledge. I wanted them to really think about it in a caring perspective, because I just kept bringing it back to the students and the reality of the data and the reality of the situation. 40% didn't like reading, 60% weren't confident, 55% not reading for more than, these are drilled in my head, and I wanted them to be the same for the staff, not reading for more than 2 hours a week. They didn't acknowledge, the students didn't recognize that actually they were reading all day, but they just didn't see it. So I wanted staff to kind of take some ownership, take that back a little bit. And so I asked them to write a pledge, focusing on an area that they wanted to actually work on and develop. So it felt more personal. I didn't ask for them in, it was just something that people could think about as part of their own development. And then going back to SLT support, once everything had been led and once everything we'd kind of gone through the systems and people had had time to embed them as part of their practice, we had observations in May, so just gone, and the whole focus was about reading across the curriculum. And the feedback from staff, the feedback from SLT, the things that were coming out of the lessons, it worked and it was really, really successful. And so for me, that was amazing because the staff were starting to be on board. But again, just to reiterate, give them the resources, share those resources, take the time to talk about it, make them see how much you care and how important it is for the students, and that will really help. So here are some examples. So I said to you, I didn't have a library. Now I saw these images with the QR codes. Again, this was on Lit Drive and I thought this was a brilliant idea. So my classroom is covered in these QR codes with the books, and the students have a look at the cover, they get their device and poof, there we go. So that's something that I have been able to do in terms of making reading more visible, costs whatever it costs at the photocopier and a little bit of my time laminating. These books I absolutely adore. They were created before I actually came into role. They were there when I started. You can see they're ginormous and it's the set text for the EdXL literature course. But they're just there in the corridor, again, massive. But the students can see them. The students know that we're very protective over them. And so that for me is something that I really love. And again, that was just something that the art department created and spent a lot of time with. Our reading posters are now up. This is actually outside our link room. So this is outside the room where the students who go and need additional support. These trophies are at the front of my classroom. This is our first ever step out for the World Scholars Cup. There's the pictures of the students who won. So again, the celebrations, keeping it visible. Every time a school tour comes past the classroom, they go in and they see those trophies. The students who didn't want to take part in World Scholars before, it didn't interest them. I mean, now it's absolutely blown out of proportion. But again, that just demonstrates that the tide is turning because it's being celebrated. It's been something that is deemed a success. And so students want to be a part of it. This is again my classroom. We've actually got 8 days left now till Globals for Scholars Cup. Well, you can see we've got the word of the week. We find quotations that we like, but this came from an Eric session, opportunity should not discriminate. It was an advert by Nike about equality, and we absolutely love that quotation in my form, so we've kept it on the board. Scrabble Championship happens every Friday. The winning name goes on the board. Kids love it because they get to write it on themselves. And this chalk paper stuff that's stuck to the wall, I think cost me the equivalent of about £4. And the kids absolutely love it. So again, interactive, they've done the board, they care about the board. This student in the middle, she was my first ever student to come in and say, Miss, I saw a book on your wall, I went out and I bought it. Nearly cried, not gonna lie. It was a great moment. But again, small wins, take them, celebrate them because it's working. She's one of my stronger readers. So again, it's not just about supporting the weaker ones, it's about supporting those who are definitely a stronger reader as well. And then these girls on the end, this is part of the Emirates Airline Literature Festival that we participate in. Again, use any opportunities that you can for extracurricular. It's really, really important. And these girls were part of a reading group. They had to read 3 different books and then they were quizzed on it. And again, you can see they're next to some of my giant books. Just some more examples of book posters in different kind of classrooms. The PE department have got their own setup going, which I absolutely love. And when you go past the PE department, they've got a big sign that says the word of the week. So again, I'm really, really lucky in my school. The head of PE really appreciates and understands everything that we're trying to do. And so we work together. In September, he and I are coming together and we're going to actually be looking at creating a media club. And so the students are going to news report back on sports fixtures, and we're going to create podcasts, again, thinking about using oracy, but it's that staff buy-in, it's working. People want to support and they want to develop. So students are really, really excited to have that opportunity as well come September. Again, just another bit of my classroom. I use any available space. If we're not working, there's some annotations that wasn't even meant to be in there. And then science lab with the book up. And then obviously just more book covers, because no library, you've got to do something to make it visible. And then just moving on. This was, again, we're very, very much in COVID times still here in the UAE. We wear masks everywhere inside. I'll come on to that a little bit with parents in a moment. But I managed to get into the sports hall and students were there acting out Macbeth, and it was one of the very first times we'd actually been able to come out of our COVID table bubbles, and that was in February. So again, just taking it out of there. Now, these thank you cards absolutely make me laugh because so many of mine are linked to Reading and Reading Plus, but this one really got to me. I was never the type of person, can't even see what that says right now, but anyway, about likes reading, but you have changed that. So again, focusing on the reading, focusing on the fact that that's one student, and again, start small because those wins will feel massive. So moving on, and I'm aware time is absolutely rapidly running away from me. Parental engagement and thinking about how to have that kind of parental support. Now, of all of those things, communication is key. For me, having parental involvement has been one of the biggest parts of actually developing our reading culture at Safa British School. I think that having the parents understand the value and the importance of reading, again, from the academic, but mainly from the holistic perspective, is really, really fundamental. So again, going back to that whole triangle, if you don't have one of these, it's going to fall apart, because we know that it doesn't matter how much we do in school. If this is not reinforced, if it's not supported, if it's not celebrated at home, it's very, very challenging to make it stick. So we have had to kind of come around a few different ways to do this, because like I've already mentioned, we do still have to wear masks indoors. We have been in bubbles a lot in classrooms in terms of seating plans. We've had to be very, very inventive this year. And all our meetings with parents have been conducted online. We've had 2 face-to-face gatherings, and that was to celebrate our World Scholars Cup successes. So the things I wanted to do with parents and getting parents involved, they're very much on the back burner at the moment until our restrictions ease a little bit. So Regular communication. Again, this is about me making sure I stick to my own deadlines and finish what I've started. So every week or every other week, we always share a Reading Plus update in the newsletter, take photographs, do a little write-up. The students now have their own newsletter as well, and they always post things that are going on in the English department. We use ePraise, which is like an online merit system, but we also use that to set homework and planners to kind of reinforce that communication with home. And so every single week, I make sure it says Reading Plus homework, spellings, Reading Plus, wider reading. So it's on there so that parents can see that we mean it and we are setting it and it is our expectation every single week. The parents can then also see when the students are rewarded for their effort and their hard work. At varying points of the year, I have presented to parents purely about reading and working together what we can do to support our reading culture. These have all been online, but I was very, very open and honest with our parents about what their children were saying about reading and about the fact that they weren't being encouraged necessarily to read that much at home. I wanted parents to see what their children were saying and what their relationships were like, just as much as I wanted staff to see it as well. And so we really focused there on the student voice and trying to give parents strategies and things that we can do to work together. And they could see, why we valued the importance of reading so much. Again, using Reading Plus, I think it's marvelous in terms of the tool. This wasn't even these two students here. This was literally just next to each other in alphabetical order. It couldn't have been more perfect. Both year 8 students, both you could see where they'd started, both you could see the difference in where they had come. So again, having that data to communicate to parents, making it so clear, making it so obvious was really, really helpful for me to help them. And then this is probably one of the biggest questions that we get asked, especially when we're on a run up to assessment week or anything to do with revision or at parents' evenings. Parents always say, what more can I be doing? What more can we do at home? And the consistent message from every member of staff is read. And that is so important. That comes from SLT, that comes from our head of secondary, it comes from me, it comes from all the other faculty heads, it comes from all the teachers. Just read. Do your Reading Plus. And that's been so helpful. So just again, some ideas so parents could see, what we were doing in terms of extracurricular, things that we can be doing at home, making sure students, simple things like, have they got a copy of the set text? Can they get a soft copy of the set text? If they can't, tell us, we'll help them out. But just putting that ownership back on families a little bit more rather than it just being us all the time. So for me, my next steps, because like I said, start small, get big. With parental engagement next school year, hopefully, I really want to be able to have parents into school. I want to be able to have reading mornings so that we can have breakfast or cups of tea and that we can read together and we can celebrate and we can share reading, and parents can see and actually model those strategies and see the kind of things, the questions that we're asking when we're reading, working together, supporting each other. Sharing data to demonstrate progress with reading ability. I've always had very mixed feelings about sharing reading ages. I said to you at the start of this presentation, I really do love Reading Plus because you can celebrate the small wins, you can celebrate the little steps of the bigger journey. So we are going to share actually starting points to where the students have got to, but we're also going to share how much actual reading that each individual child has done so that parents can see the strong correlation between masses of progress and maybe not so much progress, where we're still working with those students to try and get that progress and get that time with the reading. And then continuing to develop further sessions, getting parents to understand, having a look at the positive impact of reading and the strategies. I know that when we do this third Reading Plus assessments, we can see where we've got to by the end of the year. Parents should really hopefully be able to see a bit more of that buy-in and the difference in progress. And then the next steps for us as a school. So we're going to have our first cohort of year 10 in September, which is very exciting. And so I want to use that as an opportunity to create some reading leaders. I want our students, I've trialed this in other schools before, it works really, really nicely. As long as the students are well trained and they know exactly how to support, I want those students to then be working with students in younger years to build relationships, because we are a very family feel school, but then to also kind of, again, take that fear factor away. It's okay to read aloud. It's okay to stumble over a word. There will be dedicated curriculum time across the whole school for reading focus. Again, it's really important. If you're going to say you're a reading school, you're a school that celebrates reading, don't just give it lip service. Give it the time that it needs. It's really, really important. I'm getting a reading space with some books. It's not going to be a library, but it is going to be a really nice working space. And that's where I'd like to invite parents to come and join us, and where we can remove ourselves from the classroom and the students can actually sit somewhere else to read. Again, as our restrictions ease, I want us to be able to have more events, author visits, trips and experiences, all of the kind of things that we know just kind of highlights and celebrates reading for one day, but then we can continue to build on, and then continue to develop that staff CPD and the engagement with reading across the curriculum. So my key takeaways for today, very much, as I said at the beginning, is support, making sure that you have it from your SLT, from the line manager, from the people above you, whoever it is, but then having the time to give the support back, to listen to your colleagues, to open your classroom door, to invite yourself in when people feel comfortable. That's so important. The consistent approach, just like we would be with the students. Be consistent with yourself, be consistent with the staff. If you've said you're going to send out a word of the week, send it out. Persistence, again, that support from SLT is really, really helpful. The communication, again, keep that consistent, but then also just be realistic. Start small and work big. And that's me. So thank you very much for listening to me give a kind of whistle-stop tour. If there are any questions, please feel free. Christina, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
That's great.
And then
brilliant. Oh, thank you so much for that. You've done loads of work there, and you've done an amazing job. You must be really proud of yourself and all the children and teachers as well alike, because you've had a huge undertaking there, and you've made such a positive difference, which is absolutely fantastic to see. And what I liked is it was quite early on in that is that, you know, it doesn't matter what the children are reading, they can read anything. They don't have to stick to the classics, they don't have to stick to the norms. It's giving them, you know, it's having different choices. And I think that's really important. I remember when I was at school, you had to read certain books, and quite frankly, I don't like being told what to do. But apart from that, a lot of the books I just wasn't interested in, so I wasn't switched on to the reading. So for me to actually be able to choose what I wanted to read, that was far, far better. Now, I know we haven't got much time here, but we have got a couple of questions, if that's okay. I'm going to go to the, so this is from Laura Brown.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not an English teacher, but where did you get the set text list from? She loves the QR code idea. And what are the big books again?
The set text list, was that the ones with the books with the QR codes?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so I found the original set of those on Lit Drive. So Lit Drive is an amazing way for us to kind of get loads of different resources. It's been a gold mine for me as an English teacher. But when I saw them, I just thought the QR code idea was brilliant as well. No library, you know, you've got to get inventive. So if you go on Lit Drive, you can find them, or if you want to contact me and send me your email address, I'm more than happy to send you a soft copy of them, and then you can use them. Because I also have to be very careful. This was one of the things I meant to say. You know, the UAE, we are obviously living in an Islamic country, so I also have to be very, very careful. I teach over 40, I can't believe I forgot to even say this, it's such a huge part of the school. I teach over 40 different nationalities. We teach a heavy EAL, but we teach a very, very heavy Muslim community. So I have to be very, very careful in terms of, you know, some of the texts that I am actually recommending or putting on my wall. There's certain books that I would love to encourage, you know, the whole Heartstopper series. I know that's gone wild again on Netflix, and I've had a few quieter conversations, but again, that's not a kind of book that I can actually be openly kind of celebrating. So yeah, if you have a look on there, or if you want my email, just send me a message on Twitter or something, and then I'll get your email address and we'll go from there.
Yeah, we've put that in the, we've got another question here from Emma Jane Walker, who updates the newsletter each week. Is Read Plus your sole way of collecting data on reading progress?
So we've got two newsletters. One is run by the students, and they go off and they do very much their own thing. But the one that comes out from staff is actually collated by our head of secondary. He collates the newsletter, and then I contribute, or, you know, the science department or the art department. We share things on our teams all the time with images, and then he might say, right, okay, I really want to have a focus and a feature. But in terms of the newsletter, I mean, at the moment, I'm an English department of one. So again, that's not something that I actually mentioned. I have one teacher who was a primary school specialist, and the other is a history teacher that teaches one group of English a week. So it's very much a one-woman show at the moment. And then come September, I'm going to have 3 new English teachers working with me, which is going to feel wild.
Wow.
I know. Yeah, it's me. It's heavy. Again, when you're starting something like this, I'm not going to lie, it's a lot of work. I'm just very aware of time. It is a lot of work, but as long as you are consistent, it definitely pays off. Yeah,
very rewarding, I'm sure. So we've only got a minute. So sorry. Oh, we've got another question. Sorry, we've got another question, have we?
Oh, and I didn't answer the other one about Reading Plus, but very quickly, Reading Plus is, in terms of hard data, is in terms of actually quantitative data, that is the only thing that we're using now, because for me, the level of accuracy is the best thing that I've seen, because also it's constantly updating. I now sound like a sales pitch, sorry. But because it's constantly updating as well, based on every time the students actually read a text and do their lesson, Reading Plus for me is the most reactionary thing that I've used. So yeah, we're just sticking to that now, and then obviously student voice. And then this other question, do you find...
Did I...
I've got it here.
Yeah, you've got it.
Yeah, do you find that Reading Plus is great for secondary? We have accelerated reader, and find it limiting? I've loved it. I mean, Key Stage 3 is where we'll probably finish it, because obviously when the students get into Key Stage 4 and they're dealing with literature and language, they've got enough reading, and then obviously I'm setting them a lot of wider reading, but I will still use Reading Plus in terms of measuring their reading ages. And so for me, Reading Plus at secondary has been amazing. And I mean, I've got some super strong readers and really, really gifted readers, but the texts go right up to post-18 level, and I keep being assured that more are being written, because so many of my students have been absolutely just chomping at the bit to read them. So I think it's great for secondary. I've used accelerated reader unwillingly in the past. Feels like an awful thing to say, but I'm not a fan. Whereas this I am. The data is instant. I get it. It's so easy to communicate with the staff, with the students, and with the parents. The other thing that we do use here, because it's a national measure, is the GL progress tests for reading, and for, well, it's just the English progress test. So I do use that as well. And then obviously the assessments that we do. So we use a lot of data, but in terms of actual day-to-day comprehension and fluency skills, yeah, Reading Plus is where we go.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. Brilliant session again. All the speakers that I've engaged with have been absolutely brilliant. We had loads of positive feedback, and anybody want to share any more feedback with us after that, that would be brilliant. We'd love to hear those. So thank you everyone for tuning in today. We're around tomorrow as well, so if you want to take a look at the speakers tomorrow. But thank you so much, Rebekah, for your time and for sharing your very inspiring story.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
To you somehow, don't we? I think my books, because mine are targeted up to age, probably age 10, 11, but you're above that, so they probably maybe too
I don't know, because we've got quite a lot of weaker readers, certainly in the year 7 end, so they probably have read some.
Oh, right. Well, then they may like them then. I shall send you some books. I'll get your details and I'll send you
That
some.
would be amazing. Thank you.
Got some that are 3,000 word stories and some less, but some are kind of more illustrated. But then, you know, I was a struggling reader, and what engaged me more was more visual. I have them on audio as well, and I have some on there that they're good for interacting and reading with expression. So I'll get some.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Rebecca.